Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am very honored and excited to have Stephanie Skryzowski on the podcast today. We are going to be talking about all things finance, and yes, we will make it exciting, so don't tune off. Keep listening. She is the founder and CEO of 100 Degrees Consulting. She is a visionary chief financial officer that helps purpose-driven leaders better understand and use their numbers to make smart decisions to grow their bottom line and their impact. She founded 100 Degrees in 2015 after a decade-long career serving nonprofits around the globe from Afghanistan to Haiti, Nepal to Malawi. And we share Malawi in common. So welcome, Stephanie, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Haley. I'm so excited to chat today.
So was there a pivotal moment in 2015 after being in nonprofits for a decade that you decided to launch your own consulting firm?
Yes, it was really twofold. The first, on the personal side of things, was I was jet setting all over the world, like you mentioned. And my husband and I had been married for about 5 years, and we were ready to settle down and start a family. And so the first part was, well, I can't exactly be taking a newborn with me to Nepal, right? That doesn't seem like that's really going to work. And so I really thought, okay, I love the work that I do, but I need to figure out some other way to do it. And at the same time, I had been in this organization that I had watched grow from maybe $6 or $7 million up to $15 million. And I really thought about who that organization was as a $6 or $7 million organization. And they really needed a CFO. They needed a finance leader. But at that point, or even smaller organizations, they can't really afford somebody full time. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, if I want to be present for my hopefully soon to be family, little babies, how can I continue to do this work? And so I thought, well, there's small nonprofits out there that need this support. So I started just researching on GuideStar for organizations that were, say, under $5 million, did not have a CFO listed on their website, and just started emailing them and saying, listen, I'm really passionate about the work that you're doing. Might you need a fractional or part-time CFO? I think I can help you. And so a lot of emails turned into a couple first clients and then turned into the business that we have today.
Yes. And I would love to know, obviously you started in 2015, but you have grown your business, which is a huge accomplishment and so exciting. And I would love to know, what did that look like? Were there certain moments where you were like, I need to hire this person? Like, how have you on the business side, before we talk about like the finance side, really grown your business to where it is today?
Yeah. So at first, I started with 4 clients, and the nature of the work that we do, it's CFO and bookkeeping services. So we're basically like an outsourced finance team for nonprofits. So the nature of that work is recurring. It's not like a project where there's a specific end date. Nonprofits need those services ongoing. And so what that provided to me as a business owner, especially a brand new business owner just stepping out, was consistent income. And so I started with 2 and then I got a couple more. And so now it's not like those new clients replaced the old ones. It's 2 plus 2. And then a couple more came. And so now there's 8 clients and now there's 10 clients. So they just kept adding up. And I finally got to a point where I was like, I don't have any more hours left in my week that I'm able to work. And so instead of starting to turn clients away, I made the decision to hire somebody. And so I hired a bookkeeper to take some of that lower level work off of my plate and do the bookkeeping. And that's how our expansion grew. And now with their 16 people on my team that work full time for my company that serve our clients around the globe. But it was really that sort of pivotal moment of, okay, we're getting a lot of referrals. Do I start telling people no, or do I just start bringing in people to help me? And I don't think I realized at the time that I could have said no. I think it was just like instinct or like natural in me to be like, yeah, I can help. Now I got to go figure out a way how to do that. But that's how we've grown.
That's so exciting. And I know that it took a courageous first step to really decide if you wanted to turn away employees or hire. And you're using these terms CFO and fractional CFO. And for someone who I'm married to a CPA, so in theory, I should know what those terms mean. But for our audience, could you help them understand, like, if they wanted to hire you, or a lot of organizations don't have the capacity for a CFO. So what's the distinction between hiring a CFO in-house and also hiring a fractional CFO?
Yeah. So a CFO is a chief financial officer, and that's going to be like the most senior finance person at the organization. And that person is responsible for budgeting, forecasting, cash flow management, overseeing the audit, overseeing the rest of the finance team, really using your numbers to help leadership make smart decisions to move the organization forward. So that's the role of a CFO. And that person could be full-time in-house, a salaried employee, just like everybody else. The way that we work is on a fractional basis. And so what that means is that a fractional CFO would give a portion of their time to one organization and another portion to another. And so that's what our fractional CFOs that work for my company do. They have a portfolio of a number of clients, say maybe 10 different clients, and they split their time doing that exact same work that I mentioned, the forecasting, the budgeting, the reporting, but doing it for a number of different clients. And I've really seen this sort of fractional staffing model explode, especially over the last 5 years or so. But it doesn't just have to be for finance. So there are fractional chief marketing officers, there are fractional HR managers. And so I would really encourage any nonprofits listening, if you have a gap in your staff, on your team, you're like, we really need somebody to serve in this function, but like we can't afford the 6-figure salary that comes with it. I would definitely think about the fractional model. And again, it's not just finance. It could be literally anything. There's even fractional fundraisers. And so I think that model is a really interesting way to get super high level expertise on your team and get the work done without the price tag.
Yeah, and Cindy Wagman, who is spearheading fractional fundraising, was on the podcast. And that's where I learned about the term fractional, because it was very new to me. And so we have a whole podcast episode specifically talking about fractional fundraisers. But like you said,
Yes.
You could literally hire for anything. You obviously talk a lot about finances and all the aspects of finances that either a CFO or fractional CFO can come in. But what are challenges that you see in organizations when it comes to understanding the importance of finance and making smart decisions?
Yeah. So a lot of times organizations are very focused on the money coming in, which is obviously super important. We need fundraisers, and that is incredibly hard work. And I absolutely tip my hat to all the fundraisers out there, because I can't imagine. I would much rather manage the money once it's in-house. Anyway, a lot of times we're really focused on the fundraising strategy, bringing money in the door. And then on the finance side of things, we're focused on, okay, we got to check the boxes. Maybe we have to do an audit. We have to file the 990. We have to do a budget. We have to give our financial statements to our board every month. But they're really looking at finance as like a check the box type function, But there's really so much more that we can learn from our numbers to help make decisions. And so if we're looking at our income statement, we're easily able to see like which programs are profitable, or where are we losing money, or is our expense growth outpacing our revenue growth, AKA we're going to have a cash crunch pretty soon. And so there's so much information that we can pull out of our numbers to help us make decisions today that are going to set us up for success in the future. And so I think that's really the missing piece, or what I'm seeing organizations like not taking advantage of. Like, we're checking the boxes, we're filing our 990, we're not getting behind on that stuff, but we're not really using our financials to tell the story of our organization the way that we really could.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location, so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs. Helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, I love that. And whenever I was writing grants, I would always look at the budget first to be able to tell that story of the organization. So, what are some tips or ways that you utilize the finances to be able to bring out the story of the organization?
Yeah. So I love looking at financial metrics. And so that term alone, if you're not a numbers person, you're like, oh, metrics, that sounds scary. It's not scary. It's like very simple calculations that you can pull from your income statement, which shows your revenue and your expenses, or your balance sheet, which if you have an accounting system, and you should, these are reports that your finance person can easily pull for you with the click of a button. And so within those, we can look at our months of cash on hand. That is one of my favorite metrics to look at, because that tells you how many months could our organization continue to operate as is if not another dollar came in the door. And so this is where we're thinking about, oh, do we have a 3-month reserve or a 6-month reserve? How much cash on hand do we have? And so looking at that number and measuring that number every single month will give you an idea of, okay, are we moving in the right direction? And this plays into the bigger fundraising strategy of the organization as well. Say you have just a month and a half of cash on hand. That's how it's always been, but you really have a goal to get 3 months of cash on hand. Well, now when we're thinking about budgeting, we need to make sure that we are budgeting more revenue than expenses, so we have something left over at the end to start putting into the reserve. And so that little piece of information can then pull into the fundraising strategy and can inform the budgeting process. It's just like pulling everything together and making sure everything is aligned. I also like to look at revenue diversity. And I'm sure as a fundraiser, this is something that you're thinking about as well, but really making sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket when it comes to the money coming in the door, right? Because if something changes with one of those funders, or a particular government grant or whatever it might be, and that changes significantly, you might have a problem on your hands. I worked with an organization that was getting like 75% of their revenue from one government grant. And that was going on for many years. And finally, the government agency was like, we're done. We can't fund 3/4 of your entire organization. We're phasing out and you need to find other revenue. And it was like, whoa, wake up call. And if they had been really thinking about that strategically, like a couple of years before, they would have started diversifying their revenue much sooner. And so it's taking these numbers that we find in our financial statements and using them to align the whole organization on strategy and decision making.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people saw that over the last couple of years, especially in the organizations that I worked for in human services. They didn't necessarily suffer financially. There was an abundance of resources for those organizations, whether it was government or foundation, but they were one-time gifts, or they were as an emergency response to the need at hand. And what I saw in the organizations was they were still planning for that 10% increase, not based on an actual reality of numbers. And I think we talked about, before we hopped on the call, in those conversations, I had to force my way to the table as a director of development to meet with the C-level suite and the finance team, because I was the one that had the relationships with the community, with the foundations. I knew whether I did my relationship building or not. Sometimes they were just reserve funds. And so that actual 10% increase wasn't realistic necessarily. Like, I could do it, but it wasn't realistic to the resources that were at hand. So how can like organizations properly plan for the budget in the future and that cash flow allocation?
Yeah, such a good question. And I really recommend like long-term financial forecasting. And so a lot of times we are budgeting for a 12-month period, right? We're at the beginning of the year and we're thinking 12 months ahead. But then what that means in January is that now we're starting from zero again. And we really need to be thinking much longer term. Oftentimes we have a longer term strategic plan or a vision for the organization, but we don't have the financials to go along with that. And so then we become surprised when 14 months into our strategic plan period, we're like, oh, we don't have the money to be able to do that. We probably would have known that 8 months ago if we would have had this long-term forecast. And so what I do with the clients that I work with is we're usually looking at least 24 months on a detailed month by month level, and then another year or two on more of like a summarized level at revenue specifically. And so we know, and we factor in different like discount rates based on the probability of a particular award coming in, but we are doing very detailed forecasting, like funder by funder, month by month. And so that we're not plugging in fake or like hopeful numbers, we're plugging in realistic numbers. And so we've got this 24-month picture of, okay, yeah, next September, I know roughly based on the information I have today, how much cash we're going to have in the bank. And so that helps us make really good decisions because you've got this data in front of you. I know that might sound scary to some people listening, like, oh, a giant spreadsheet. I don't know. Like, it's quite simple. It does not have to be super complicated. There's not a lot of formulas. It's really just plugging some numbers into cells. So you've got this long-term financial vision beyond just the budget year. And that's where I see a lot of organizations stopping, is right there.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I know you have a lot of like resources that you can share, and we will link to anything that you're willing to share in the show notes in terms of your products and things like that. But one of the things I saw on your website is that you do leadership reporting. The board is financially responsible for the organization, and sometimes they don't get the best picture of the financial standing of an organization. For instance, I work for an organization where there's a CEO transition. The CEO came in from the board, and when he came into the CEO level, he actually did a deep dive into the finances, and the organization wasn't doing as well as it had been reported to the board. So how can leadership better inform the whole organization on the financial standing so that they know where they stand and what needs to come in to maintain that financial stability?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a good question, because I'm also working with an organization who the board had been presented much more optimistic financials than was real. And so what we did in that situation was basically put together the true, real financial forecast, not the hopeful version where it's like, oh, we're crossing our fingers, we have a 10% chance, but we're going to plug it into the forecast anyway because it's going to look nicer for the board. No, give them a real picture of, the financial statements themselves, like the income statement, the balance sheet. That's what has already happened. Those should be accurate. But I think that what leadership can provide to the board and what the board can ask leadership from is a true forecast, a forecast of revenue, expenses, and cash flow for at least the next 12 months so that the board can see, okay, what does the real picture look like over the next quarter? How much money do we actually think is coming in? This should not be, again, like the optimistic, hopeful forecast. Of course, we're all hoping that we're going to get this surprise $1 million grant. This needs to be the realistic forecast. An example, I just talked to a finance committee of one of my clients this week, and we show them a very conservative 12-month cash flow. And in this 12-month cash flow right now, revenue is about $1 million in cash coming in. Expenses are about $2 million going out. And so we're showing them that that's $1 million deficit. But we're being honest and saying, this is where we are right now. Because when you're being totally transparent as to what you think is coming down the pike, the board is going to be more inclined to be like, oh, okay, we're in a situation. How can I help? What can I do? When you're more transparent, you bring people in, they're more bought into the work that you're doing. Whereas if you're showing this sort of fake rosy picture, what's the incentive for them, for anybody to really help out? And so, yeah, I would definitely just say very conservative, realistic forecast is what a board should be asking leadership for if they're not getting it already.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important distinction. Like accountability and transparency is so important because you don't want to go to your donors out of desperation that you're not going to meet your payroll or you're not going to be able to fund your programs. That isn't a healthy way to pitch your organization. And there is some like transparency is so important in fundraising. If you don't meet your metrics or your goals, or there is something that happens in the finances that you necessarily didn't foresee, hopefully with working with you, they do. But it's that piece of transparency and inviting people into that conversation is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100% agree on transparency. And people get very nervous sharing, being open about their finances because it's like, oh, what if things don't look good? That's embarrassing. Well, that's where, like you're saying, you don't want to go to your funders and be like, yeah, can I have $20,000 tomorrow so I can make payroll? You can also sort of shape that story. Yes, we only have 1 month of cash in the bank right now, but our goal is to get to 3. And if we have 3 months of cash in the bank, here's the impacts that we can have. So here's the bigger vision. So I always think it's important to connect when you're talking about your financials, connect it to the vision for your organization's impact and your work. And the money will follow, right? Articulate the vision and the money will follow. And so I think transparency is huge. And the other thing I'll say about transparency is that there was a study published in, I think it was like the Journal of Accounting and Auditing or something like that. They studied nonprofits and their profiles on GuideStar, and the organizations that were more transparent and shared more information, put more stuff in their GuideStar profiles, received 53% more in contributions the following year. And so they were linking that, saying that these organizations that were very open about their programmatic and financial results got more money, basically raised more money. That's pretty compelling to say, okay, if we're going to share more information, we could potentially raise significantly more money because of that trust that you're building with donors, et cetera. So yeah, I'm very big on transparency.
Yes, I love that. And thank you so much for giving those examples. And we talked a little bit about leadership and the board, but I also would love to know how you navigate the symbiotic relationship between the finance, fundraising, and program team. Like, why is it so important that nonprofit leaders and just the whole organization as a whole understand finance and are able to work together towards the same goal?
Yeah, everybody has a part to play, right? Fundraisers are bringing the money in, program people are spending it, and finance is the sort of the person in between that's managing all of those things. And so it doesn't fall just on finance as the only person or the only group that is managing the money and managing the numbers. We are all responsible for taking care of the resources that we've been awarded. And so as a finance person, I'm always trying to bring in programs and trying to bring in development to participate in the budgeting process. I don't just want to throw fundraising numbers on a spreadsheet and like hope that development can keep up. I need the fundraising team to help me put together very accurate strategic projections. And then on the expense side, I need programs to help me figure out, okay, what's the impact that you want to have this year? And what are the resources that you need to make that happen? Because often our strategic plan and our budget are not aligned. We have these like pie in the sky goals for our impact and our programs, and then we have a shoestring budget. And so that will never work. And so we need to make sure that we're budgeting the appropriate resources and then have the fundraising plan in place to be able to raise enough money to meet those needs of programs. So it's really like everybody needs a seat at the table. And I would really encourage anybody listening, if you're not the finance person and you're not involved in the budgeting process, to ask to be involved. And finance people, if there are any finance people listening, if you are not pulling out chairs at the table for everybody in the organization to be part of the process, you're really you're missing out. Because I feel like the best, most accurate budgets and the best, most accurate projections that are going to give me the information I need to provide to the executive director, the CEO, to make good decisions, the best information comes from other people. It's not from me, the finance person. And so, yeah, I think it's really on all of us to, if you're the one that is controlling the room, controlling the table, pull up seats for everyone. And if you're one of those people that is in programs or development, ask for a seat at the table. I think that's huge. And I'm so glad that you were able to do that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. It's all about relationships. We talk about in fundraising, relationship building, and I talk about on this podcast and in my work, it's all about relationship building internally so we can be successful and deliver on our mission. And how does a well-established financial strategy allow nonprofits to make informed decisions that not only meet immediate needs, but allow for that long-term financial sustainability?
I think it's what we've been talking about is understanding your current financial position. How healthy are you as an organization right now? And then building out a detailed forecast that shows revenue, expenses, cash flow into the future. And so that's really going to enlighten you as to whether or not, maybe things look okay right now, but oh, wait, in 12 months, like this organization I'm talking about, where they right now have $1 million deficit in their budget for this year, if they don't start making up that gap pretty soon, they're essentially going to run out of cash. And so we are able to see that using these projections that we've come up with and this spreadsheet that we look at every single month. And so I think that the important piece is making this part of your monthly routine. And a lot of organizations, we create a budget at the beginning of the year, we put it into the accounting system, and we look at maybe a budget versus actual report on a monthly basis. But then we're not taking that to the next level and doing projections. For example, when we create the budget in January, maybe we think, okay, this $400,000 grant from this foundation is a renewal. It's going to come in April because it comes in April every single year. So we put it in the budget for April. Well, March rolls around and you're like, oh, wait, they've shifted their payout schedule. Now we're not going to get this until September. Well, if you don't have any type of forecasting or projection mechanism where you are updating things in real time, that budget where you had it budgeted in April, that's not going to be helpful anymore. And so having this process, you're updating projections every single month is really important versus just the budget's important. We don't touch the budget, but then the projections are what we update every single month. And I think that piece is the key to long-term financial health, sustainability, and then of course, looking at the metrics that we were talking about before as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important. So can we get into the nitty gritty of what cash flow projections look like, especially for maybe an organization that is listening? I think there is an abundance of resources, and we talk a lot about this on this podcast, but typically nonprofits operate out of an idea of limited resources, and having that cash flow projection is almost selfish, I guess. Maybe not selfish, but having that abundance of money in the future and planning for the future, most nonprofits plan for today. Mm-hmm. And operate on today and those limited resources. So what does it look like to go into cash flow projections, and how does that allow space for organizations to grow?
It's interesting because you're right. I like to look at things from an abundance perspective. I totally agree with you. I think there's more than enough to go around. But I'm also saying that we need to look at cash flow projections and forecasting on a very conservative, realistic level. And so I think there's a balance between the two. And we really need the conservative view because we need a realistic picture of, okay, based on the information that we have right now, what does our cash look like in 3 months? What does our cash look like in 6 months? What does our revenue look like, et cetera? We need that realistic picture. But there's still space for an abundance mindset and an abundance approach where we're we've got this very conservative view so that we can plan realistically, but we're not limiting ourselves to that. I know organizations that use this is getting into the next level of complexity. But like I said, they use a sort of discount method in their forecasting where they are only including a percentage of the total revenue for a particular grant or award based on how likely they think it is that they're going to get it. And so when they look at the whole big picture, they've got like tens of millions of dollars potentially out there. Like maybe we'll get this $10 million grant. Maybe we'll get this $3 million grant. But then what they put into the forecast is only a small percentage of that based on how realistic it is they think they're going to get it. So like if there's $1 million grant in there, but they're like, yeah, we're still building that relationship. I don't know if we're going to get that. It's really only 10% like realistic that we think that's going to happen. But we're not going to put $1 million in our cash forecast. They put like 100,000, for example. So that's like next level of complexity that sort of pairs together this conservative cash flow forecast so that we are not making plans based on some pie in the sky, like abundance budget that's maybe not quite realistic yet. But we're also not limiting ourselves and totally shutting ourselves down and being like, well, we're only going to raise 200,000 this year and limiting ourselves that way. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is one way I've seen organizations balance those two things.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And thank you for building out those distinctions. And can you share a story of where this financial foresight and cash flow played a pivotal role in a nonprofit's ability to navigate unforeseen challenges and maintain its impact?
Yes. So I'm thinking of one organization where, like many organizations, they received the large majority of their revenue in Q4. Working with them, it was around that time. And they had been in a cash crunch the previous year where it was like late September and they had to take a personal loan from their CEO in order to make payroll. Like it was that bad. They had gotten down to no cash in the bank, basically, at that time of year before I think their gala or something was in October where they were going to get a big influx of cash. And so what we did as soon as I came in was like, okay, we need to map out the next 12 months and when we have revenue coming in, when our expenses are going out so that we can see in the future, long before we're asking board members for loans to make payroll, long before that happens, we can see like exactly what month or exactly what week that's going to happen. And so we put together this forecast and we were able to see, okay, this is actually bad because this year it's actually even a month earlier. We're going to hit the cash crunch a month earlier. So what did they do? Well, they shifted the asks from their gala that was normally in the fall. They shifted the ask to the spring. And so some of the donors that normally would have given towards the gala gave earlier in the year. And so that was able to boost them up pretty significantly. They shifted like a couple of their like fundraising, like mail campaigns that were in more like September back to school, shifted those a little bit earlier. And so we were able to move things around. And also some people that they had wanted to hire at some point, they just deferred that. It wasn't like an urgent need. And so we're able to make these changes far in advance so that they did not run into the same cash crunch, which meant that there was consistency in programs. They did not miss payroll. Nobody was losing sleep at night because they had to ask a board member tomorrow for a personal loan to meet payroll. Like you're just able to make decisions so much more strategically, so much more proactively versus being reactive.
Yeah, and I love that idea of being more proactive. There are instances where obviously you do have to be reactive, but doing as much planning ahead as you can. And then, like you said, you're able to invite donors into that conversation and maybe shift things a little bit. And I think that's so needed in these conversations. Are there any other tips that you would give to our listeners regarding how important it is for finances to make informed decisions?
Yeah, I think all the pieces that we talked about are huge. Looking at your financial statements every month and calculating a couple key metrics. I mentioned just a couple of them. And then forecasting every single month. And so again, looking ahead each month to what's coming down the pike for your organization. So you have this live, like real-time view of what's going to happen in the future. And then the last piece is that it's that transparency. And so building relationships with people within the organization, outside of the organization, and being really transparent about your numbers and inviting people to the table, I would say are the three pieces that are really going to help build a financially strong, financially sustainable nonprofit. And I would just really encourage anybody listening, if you're not a finance person, but you're really interested in learning more, to ask your finance person at your organization to talk to them and say, listen, I'm really interested in learning a little bit more about what our income statement means. Can you walk me through it? Can you explain it? Can you send it to me? These reports are very simple things that come right out of your accounting system with the click of a button. So it should be no problem for them to provide to you. And I think that would go a long way in also building that connection and relationship with your finance person.
Stephanie, if people are listening to this and they're like, we need to hire you, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find all about our company at 100, like the number 100, degreesconsulting.com. And I also do have, if you want some like templates for some of the things that we've been talking about today, if you go to 100degreesconsulting.com/cash, there's like a cash flow forecasting template and a budget template there that will help you. So if you're like, oh, I want to do this, but I don't think I have anything right now, and we don't want to stare at just a blank Excel sheet and create something new, you can check that out as well. That's just a free resource for you.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes. Well, Stephanie, it has been such a joy getting to chat with you and learn from you. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, Haley, thank you so much for having me.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.